Welcome to the Character Analysis Podcast, where we talk about pop culture, true crime, and human behavior. I'd like to discuss some points that I saw raised in some Idaho 4 related content, whether content on TikTok, content on YouTube, really, a lot of these platforms. And the first point I want to discuss has to do with how we attach narratives to certain aspects of this investigation, to this crime. One of the big ones being Dylan saw an intruder and didn't call 911. That when people say things like this, it's kind of that hindsight bias where, because we know what happened, we look back on what led up to it, or the aftermath, and because of the information that we have, we apply that to our perception of the event. What we know definitively is that Dylan saw a man leave the house at around 4:17, 18. That's what we know because of what's stated in the PCA. At 4:17, they hear what sounds like voices or whimpers and a thud. And so, because that's sort of a benchmark, they use that, and then we hear the 4:21, the car taking off. So they assume that he leaves sometime in that very small window. All we know is that she saw a man leave. We don't know that she thought he was an intruder. And I also want to, touch on how people say, well, she heard crying and she heard this, and then she saw a man with a mask leave. And why didn't she call 911? We've been through this. We don't know what she did, right? Well, we do, actually, because based on an interview with Kaylee Gonzalez's mom that she did with the Drunk Turkey podcast, and based on the PCA, we know that the time frame of the murders was 4 a.m. to 4:25 a.m. And Kaylee's mom said that that's a call or some form of communication was sent at 4:25 a.m. Now, put yourself in the shoes of Dylan. She sees somebody leave, and then a few minutes later, there's communication on their phones that indicate she contacted somebody. And according to Kaylee's mom, it was the other roommates, it was the other housemates. So here she is, she sees somebody leave after hearing noises. Like, no one's denying that she heard noises. Maybe, and that she heard crying. We know that this is a fact. What we don't know is what she said in that text. What we don't know is, what did she do? Why was she leaving her room? Or she got up, she looked out the door. The fact that she was able to see his eyebrows and what he was wearing, I don't think she was just looking through a crack. I've already talked about this. I think she was well outside the door. Why was she doing that? Could she have been going to check on Xana when he left and she sent a text? Isn't it possible that she sent a text saying, "Who was that?" Or, "Xana, I heard you crying. Are you okay?" And isn't it also possible that she would go to their room? Because all it says is she went in and locked her door. It doesn't say she stayed there. See, again, we attach a narrative, just like we attach a narrative to the whole frozen shock phase. We don't know what she meant by that. People are assuming it means she was terrified. It could just mean that she was startled. And that was just how she said it at the time. The point I'm trying to make is, this narrative that we've attached of, well, she saw an intruder. We don't know that. You're head hopping now. Now you're assuming that she knew that this was an intruder, when in fact she's living in a house where there was constantly people in and out. So how would she know that it was an intruder? It was in the like low 20s that night. Why would it strike her as odd that somebody in Idaho would leave a house to go outside in 20 something degree weather with a, let's say, a balaclava on or a ski mask? Why would that strike her as odd? And also, we don't know if she was impaired. We don't know if she was high or drunk. And her reaction time was just like, well, what did I just see? We don't know. Everybody's assuming that she knew, and we have no proof of that. There's also a lot of talk of the footprint. And people say, well, because they couldn't see the footprint, there must have been a cleanup. That's not true. It was a latent footprint. They had to use different chemicals to know that the footprint was there. And when they were cleaning out his apartment, there was a photo of a big box of booties. I mean, there's no way he wasn't wearing booties in that house. So that could be why the print was so latent, because he had probably had on a couple layers of those booties. And that's why nothing showed up. That's why it was latent. But this thing with the footprint and the cleanup, I need to ask, because people keep saying that the roommates cleaned up as a way to protect whoever really did this because they know them. All right, I'll play along. So you're saying that they cleaned the floor, and that by cleaning the floor, that would somehow um, prevent police from knowing who it was. Because there's a lot more involved with that. Did they also plan on going to all the dead bodies and scraping underneath their nails and looking for any kind of DNA? What about fingerprints? Did they go into the rooms and wipe everything down? Like, these are 20-year-old women, and you think these people know how to clean a crime scene? I've said this so many times. The police would know if somebody cleaned. It would be obvious. They would know. So we really need to ditch this narrative that there was a cleanup. Because the footprint, cleaning the floor, that's the least of their worries. That's the least of anybody's worries who's just committed a murder. The footprints. Because anybody could be wearing a Nike shoe, right? Anybody could be doing that. Anybody could be wearing any type of shoe or leave a footprint. Nothing left on the floor, right? Unless, other than blood, their blood, would would sort of reveal the identity of the murderer. Again, but blood would, but that's probably it. And unless they went into all the rooms and they cleaned everything in there. Cleaning the floor is nothing. It's nothing. So why would they clean the floor and not anything else? And I also want to remind people, because people say, well, Dylan and Bethany didn't know Brian Koberger. So if there's no connection, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what we know from Ann Taylor's court document. According to Ann Taylor, there's no connection between Koberger and the victims. We do not know if there is a connection between Koberger and Dylan and Bethany. We don't know if he showed up at that house looking for one of them. We don't know. So we don't know that he didn't know them. He very well might have. And I can't get past this idea that people think that these two young women would intentionally stay in a house knowing that there were four dead, decomposing bodies? Who would do that? The other narrative that I think is, I mean, the best word to use is false, is that the surviving roommates called friends, plural, over to the house. Here's the only thing that we know, and this comes from Kaylee's mom. The next morning, when Dylan and Bethany woke up, at some point, Hunter Johnson, who was Ethan's best friend, was contacted. And he came over to the house and he got Xana's bedroom door open and discovered the bodies. Now, did he bring some with him? Maybe, because again, if nobody knows it's a crime scene, no one's going to know. Like, no one's going to know not to walk in the house. And we also don't know, did he call somebody? Like, hey, have you seen Ethan? I just got a call from Dylan and whatever, and I'm going over to the house. We don't know that they called multiple people. We know that multiple people were there when law enforcement got there, but that's all we know. We don't know who called them because the roommates could have been making the rounds of phone calls. Maybe they went up to Kaylee and Maddie's room and they were like, Kaylee's not in her room, and you know, I don't know. I can't get into Maddie's room and nobody's answering. And maybe they were making calls saying, hey, have you guys seen them? Like, I don't know where we can't get in touch with them. And I'm kind of worried because, of XYZ of what happened last night. And so people, maybe because they live so close and it's a close knit community, so maybe their friends just kind of came over on their own or they were invited. But again, if you don't know a crime occurred, you don't know that it's a crime scene.